So, good morning, everybody. Just another sound check to make sure you can hear me. Okay. And that it's loud enough. Okay. So here we are, mid-holidays. Hanukkah just ended, in the last stretch before Christmas, Kwanzaa, all whatever you celebrate. I welcome you. My name is Trudy. I'm the founding teacher at InsightLA, speaking to you from Los Angeles, actually from Marina del Rey, from the unceded lands of the indigenous people who were here before us, the Tongva, mostly in this area, indigenous people. And I want to talk with you this morning about where we go for refuge. I know these holiday times they're exciting for some people. They're a welcome time to see family, and for other people, they dread them. It's not fun to think about seeing family. All these questions, how do we talk to each other when we have so different views about things? You know, it's really can be a fraught time, as well as a joyful time. So what do we do? Where do we go for refuge during this time? And for those of you who may be new to this sitting group, although actually I'm looking at a very, very small group today, which is great, it's more intimate. For those of you who may be new to the group, we divide our time roughly into thirds. Excuse me, I forgot to get some water, I will do that. We're going to meditate now. I give a little bit of guidance during the meditation, not too much, trying to find a balance between the quiet that we really need and crave in this life. Buenos dias, Gabby. And and having some guidance that'll help us sort of approach meditation from some slightly different angles. It's never exactly the same each week. And then we have some teaching and some time for discussion and conversation together. So while I get a glass of water, find a comfortable sitting posture for your body. I'll be right there. And I want to thank Camille for being our moderator today. Thank you, Camille. Thank you very much. So let's sit together. So I think today I would like to do a little bit more guidance in the sense of doing an aspect of what is a loving kindness or compassion meditation, but it's really focused more on forgiveness. It's very simple. And so I'm going to lead you through that. And please feel free to do whatever is your own practice. And, you can just tune me out, and we'll also sit in silence. So taking a deep breath in and releasing, we take 3 deep cleansing intentional breaths one more time. Relaxing as you breathe out. And one more deep breath in and releasing. Allowing your breath to return to its own natural rhythm. And just relaxing back and allowing the breath to breathe you. This is the beautiful thing about our breath. We don't have to make it happen. Don't have to create it. Don't have to remember to do it. Breath is our lifelong companion. Here with us, for us, as long as we're alive. So just taking some time to relax into feeling each breath, appreciating each breath as it breathes you. Your attention wanders away, just gently shifting, leaning back just a tiny bit, straightening your spine and gently shifting back into receiving this breath, receiving this moment. Instead of tipping slightly forward, leaning toward anticipating the next moment, just shifting the body back into receiving this one. And just forgiving yourself for your wandering mind, your busy mind, your sleepy mind, however it is for you this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you happen to be. And if you feel drawn to doing a bit of forgiveness meditation, it can be really helpful going into emerging from the holidays, from this time of year that raises expectations and often brings disappointments as well as joy. We begin by forgiving ourselves for being who we are, how we are in this life. And it's very simple. I will just offer some phrases and you can repeat them silently to yourself. I forgive myself for being imperfect. I forgive myself for making mistakes. I forgive myself for being a learner in this life. In other words, being in process, always learning, always growing, but not knowing everything and often not knowing how. I forgive myself for being imperfect. I forgive myself for making mistakes. I forgive myself for being a learner in this life. For any way I have harmed myself, intentionally or unintentionally, I forgive myself. And just sitting with that sense of extending some compassion and kindness, acceptance and forgiveness to this being we call ourself. And now call to mind someone who may have hurt your feelings or disagreed with you in an unskillful way. Please don't pick the person who abused you the most in this lifetime. We're just doing a short meditation together. But maybe somebody that just keeps coming to mind because they said something that really bothered you or they irritate you. And we offer forgiveness to this being. I forgive you for being imperfect. I forgive you for making mistakes. I forgive you for being a learner in this life. And once again, I forgive you for being imperfect. I forgive you for making mistakes. I forgive you for being a learner in this life. for the way that you harmed me, intentionally or unintentionally. I forgive you for the way you hurt my feelings. I forgive you. And maybe just for now, I forgive you. And then when you're ready, calling to mind, either visualizing or sensing them near you, somebody that you have hurt, and something you did that hurt their feelings or made them mad, or that caused some distance between you. Please forgive me for being imperfect. Please forgive me for making mistakes. Please forgive me for being a learner in this life. Please forgive me for being imperfect. Please forgive me for making mistakes. Please forgive me for being a learner in this life. In whatever way, however I may have harmed or hurt you, either intentionally or unintentionally, please forgive me. And then returning to the movement of the breath in the body. The breath always forgives us. It's always with us. Doesn't care if we're bad or good. It is unconditionally present, moment by moment, breath by breath. So any of you who feel moved to turn on your cameras, thank you. I love to see your faces. And if you're not, you're still in your jammies or whatever, it's okay too. The beauty of Zoom is, you can be wearing a nice top and have your pajama bottoms on. I know we're sick of Zoom, but this is what we have. And it's really a blessing, actually, because many of you would not be able to come to LA and meet in person. So this is a great thing. Yeah, so this morning, I want to do the forgiveness practice a little bit before talking about refuge, because first of all, we need to feel worthy of going for refuge in something that is meaningful and that will bring a sense of confidence and comfort to our lives. And so it's almost like those 3 deep cleansing breaths we take at the beginning of the meditation, that the forgiveness is a form of self-compassion, a form of offering loving kindness to ourselves and to others, being compassionate for the way that we're all learners on this path and we inevitably mess up. And so forgiveness, we have had whole talks on forgiveness, and we'll do them again because it's really important to remember that it's a process. It's not something you just decide to do all at once because you did it in a meditation. And it's not something that can be used to bypass a lot of the feelings that have to be felt and metabolized before we're ready to forgive, especially with big things. But just to offer that kindness and that remembering that we're all on this path together, that we really are all learners in this life, and that we all are worthy of, that we all matter, and that we're all worthy of having a safe and reliable refuge, especially right now, because it just feels so scary right now. There's this huge war that just doesn't stop. And, initially, of course, the world was 100% with Israel for the massacre in really horrible ways of families, kids, parents, peaceful, just people like us, just like us. But then, of course, the process of the retaliation has gotten so out of hand, it seems, and it's just unbearable to witness. And if you've been following me on Instagram, Trudy_Goodman, you can see the last post. I just acknowledge I'm having trouble sleeping sometimes at night with all of this. And yes, it was the last night of Hanukkah, light a candle and offer a prayer. But there was that practice of extra candle this year, a candle for all of these places of unbearable suffering. Gaza, Israel, Palestine, Sudan, Darfur, the Congo, Ukraine, Myanmar. It just feels like anywhere we look in the world, there is some horrible conflict going on. So what can we do? What can we do besides cry or get outraged? Or I think what we can do, and what is really important to do, is titrate the amount of news that we're taking in. That's just a practical step. For example, I read it, I don't watch it, because the images are too sensitive. And, not sleeping, being sensitive to the cries of the world. Yes, it's painful. Yes, it's unbearable, but we have a practice to sustain us. We have a practice that can give us the strength to hold all of it and to take a break, to enjoy being with friends, to enjoy our families if you have one, or if they're enjoyable, and if not, your chosen family of friends, to take a break and ask yourself, where do I go for refuge? Where do you go for refuge? It's a great question to ask yourself. And I'll talk a little about the classic refuges in Buddhist psychology, but just take a moment right now and ask yourself, where do I go for refuge? And sometimes I go for refuge in, I'm trying to learn Spanish and I'm doing it on Duolingo and I'm not surrounded with any Spanish speakers, so it's really slow. And also I'm 78, so I learn words and then I forget them. I have to learn them again. That never happened when I was young. And yeah, sometimes I go for refuge. I'm watching this program about little puffins. It's actually geared toward 2 and 3-year-olds. And then there's one about a family of llamas, which I think was originally a children's story, but now, anyway, they've made it into a cartoon. And you can choose on Netflix which language you want to watch in. So I choose Spanish and I slow it down. And honestly, you can ask Jack. Sometimes I go for refuge to the puffins and their cute adventures. But of course, we're here to talk about, to look at what our refuges are. I mean, I think the puffins are certainly better than the cookie jar, which is another place. And, we all have our particular virtues and vices, and hopefully where you go for refuge isn't harming yourself, at least not too much. Maybe sugar is, yes, of course, it's harmful, but maybe not too much. And the classic refuges, of course. I mean, when I encountered, I think 25 or 26 maybe, when I encountered the Buddhist teachings of Buddhist psychology and meditation and refuge. And I fell in love. It felt so right and it felt so true. And I think any 20-somethings need emotional refuge, but I definitely needed it at that time. And, I felt sort of in awe of my teacher, and I imagined that he was completely perfectly enlightened and never had a bad day, which you grow up and you realize, no, that's not true. But whenever you begin to envision the possibility of awakening into a happier life, a life where you feel more connected to people, to the world, like you belong in this life, that you have a seat at the table of humanity, the more you begin to want to grow your capacity for love and awareness and be of benefit to the world around you. This is the more that happens, the more it actually strengthens our sense of commitment to this path. And the classic refuges are refuge in the Buddha, our capacity for awareness, for loving awareness, the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, who offered these teachings, and all the teachings of mindfulness and self-compassion, and they're all derived from Buddhist psychology, positive psychology, etc. So we offer some bow of respect for the historical Buddha and these teachings that are benefiting so many. But for us, it's also a more a personal refuge, because with all of the refuges and all of these teachings, we're building on qualities that are innate to our hearts, innate to our human hearts. We're not having to invent them or, reach way, way up high for something that, we don't know anything about and learn it, like how to speak Spanish. We have the capacity in our hearts to be aware. And we have, as I've often said, this like superpower of being able to direct our attention where we want it to go. And then we learn mindfulness, and we train our hearts. We come back to the breath, we come back to our forgiveness meditation, we come back to the chosen subject of meditation over and over again. We get lost and drift away. We begin again. The beauty is it's never too late. You can always come back to this moment. We train our minds to be able to focus long enough to learn and be able to stay with whatever it is we've chosen to direct our attention to long enough to learn from it, to learn how it arises and passes away, whatever it is, to learn how we're not in control of it, totally, whatever it is, you know. To learn the truths of this life, which when we bring that kind of presence and focus and loving awareness, they reveal themselves to us. They reveal themselves to us. And we do this because we want to be in harmony with the flow of things in life. We do. And so we also go for refuge in the teachings, because we're going for refuge in awareness and loving awareness and our capacity for that, and trusting that, and having confidence that we can do that in any moment, no matter how pleasant, unpleasant, or neither. We can be awake and aware. We do that because of the teachings, which we call the Dharma. But the Dharma also means more than that. You know that. It means the laws of nature. It means the way things are. It means that the waves roll in instead of rolling out. It means that the trees grow up instead of growing down. It's just the way that things are. And just as the Buddha sort of shows us the path, and there are other paths, this is just the one that has illumined my life and that I love so much that I want to share it with you, but there are certainly other paths. And I've been learning more and more about Islam. Very curious about this path because it's a big part of what's going on in lots of places in the world. But the teaching of the Dharma, the Buddha's teaching, is that our hearts are innately, originally clear, calm, sane, and good. They get covered over, right, with all this other stuff from our conditioning as children, from our conditioning as a culture, from our particular families and so forth. But when we go for refuge, we're really taking refuge in the teachings that lead us toward, that are what the Buddha called onward leading. They lead us toward awakening. I was listening to young Pueblo, Diego, I forget his real name, talk about his new book called The Way Forward. And I love that title. It's like, what is onward leading? What is the way forward? And it's the methods and practices that we do here together. And there's so many of them. And then we also go for refuge in community, the community of the people who are practicing these teachings on this path, because we can learn with and from each other. And that's really important. And also because there are people who inspire us on this path. I am so inspired always by my friend Anam Thupten, my Tibetan friend, and we're going to be teaching together in March. So I'll keep you posted about that. It just inspires me so much. And people who are just practicing sincerely, they don't, and sometimes the deepest people are also the quietest people who haven't necessarily written any books and who might not be on social media, who are just practicing quietly and being of service in this life. I just came from being at Ram Dass's house, where I did a week of retreat after the retreat that Jack and I flew to Maui to teach. And yes, who else gets paid to go to Maui? That was a blessing. But then I did a week of retreat at Ram Dass's house. And, the people, he's been dead now. The 22nd is his yahrzeit, the anniversary of his day of death. And it was 2019. So my math is so horrible. It was right. Let's see. Anyway, it was that. Thank you. 4 years. Thank you, Meredith. But his spirit is so alive in that house. you can go and do a personal retreat in the Ohana, a little cottage right next to the house. They actually have two of them. And if you're a retreatant there, you can go up and you can actually schedule a visit too, but that's a little harder. You can go upstairs into his study and just meditate there. And I've told you this before, but I'm encouraging you to go. It's just like sitting in a deep well of love. It's so easy to meditate up there. And the people who are his companion, Dasima, who took care of him for 15 years until he died, she was not his romantic companion. She was his dear friend, but she did all his intimate care day in, day out, day in, day out, which was complicated because he was an old man in his 80s who had been sitting in a wheelchair for 20 years. So his care was complicated. And she is the ma of the household. And there's a bunch of young people living there, ranging from 22 to, I think, mid-30s, the oldest one. And their practice, they're doing practice together, they're chanting. That's big part of their practice is called kirtan, singing your prayers. And they are also they have a public meditation once a week, but they meditate. They do a Hindu practice called arti. They do all kinds of things, their own practice, but then every other day, I think they offer something for the public to come and practice with them. But it's very quiet. It's Dasima, yeah, she would never write a book, and she certainly could care. She doesn't go on social media except to follow the people she loves, to take a look at, how they're doing or what they're saying. And her life is selfless service. It is so inspiring. And this is how Sangha, or satsang, they say, this is how we inspire each other. This is why I encourage you to go to the breakout groups if you can, and share your confusion with each other. And you might think, well, how does it help to share our confusion? But it does. For one thing, you realize your problems are universal. You're not alone. For another thing, you actually, something somebody else says strikes you a certain way, and you learn with it. You learn from it. So this is our refuge in Sangha. And when we take refuge in what's called these are called the three jewels, or the triple gem, or why are they called jewels? Because when we take refuge in these things, we don't need to feel confused anymore. And we don't actually have to feel overwhelmed anymore. And when feelings of overwhelm come, we know what to do. We know to either take a deep breath, go for a mindful walk, be with a friend, cuddle with, they have a dog named Leela. Leela is the Sanskrit word for just the play of existence, the dance of existence. And there's this big friendly dog. And I noticed that each one of us at different points would just sort of like get on the couch and snuggle with Leela. She's a big dog, but she would climb into my arms, put her head on my shoulder like a huge baby. And I'm telling you, this is a safe and reliable refuge. Unfortunately, she's not my dog. I travel too much to have a dog. Jack and I have had this conversation. I'm like a kid. Can we please get a dog? No, we cannot get a dog, which I understand. It wouldn't be really fair to the dog to live in an apartment with people who travel. But, why are these practices safe and reliable? Because they really do bring emotional steadiness and balance and a kind of clarity and discernment, so that we can see when do we need to establish more boundaries with our family or friends? When do we need to do that in this life? And how do we handle the news? And where is your refuge when you are witnessing unbearable images of displaced people and bombed out buildings and a place being destroyed, completely destroyed? It's just, in Zen, they say you have a true self from before your parents were born. And you can understand this in two ways. It's a koan. Who were you before your parents were born, right? And you can understand it metaphorically. Like, who were you before all these opinions and ideas and traditions were sort of installed in you as the right way? I remember the first time that I lived with somebody, and I was cutting tomatoes, and they said, "Oh, you slice them so thick," with all this judgment in their voice. I slice them really thin, like this. Clearly the right way to slice a tomato, right? So, I mean, that's a tiny thing, but countless of them all day long, right? Especially if you have a partner or roommates, you're living with people. So this is where forgiveness comes in. But who is your true self before your parents were born, before you had all these opinions about how you're supposed to slice things? Or you can understand it literally, that it's pointing to consciousness itself, the unborn awareness that has always been here, and that according to the teachings will always be here, even when life in the form of this person has ended. I reflect on these things a lot because I'm coming toward the end of my life, and people say, "Oh, don't say that." Well, I mean, it might, who knows? I could live to be 108. It's possible. It's a Buddhist number, but most people don't reach that number. And the people who do might not always be wanting to be at that number either at that point. So I think this question, how do we find refuge? How do we find refuge? What is your refuge? What supports you in this life? And, I have like poems and this and that, but I almost feel like given that many of you will be spending time with extended families or your chosen families, or being alone and wishing you weren't, or, just however it is for you in this particular holiday season in your life. I almost would rather have some dialogue with you about what it is that supports you, about what's happening for you, about any questions that you might have, and just continue teaching with you from that place